I'd like to call the meeting to order. Good evening. The Wednesday, February 8th, 2012 meeting of the Lowell Conservation Commission. There are two main items on the agenda. I'd like to, I'd like it if we could entertain a motion to take the second item first, because I don't anticipate that will take all that much time considering what's been filed on it. So if there's a motion to do so.
I move to take the second item as the first item, the Lowell Regional Wastewater Utility Solar Panel Project.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. Mr. Lowell, if you could identify yourself for the record.
We'll be discussing tonight. Thank you for having me back so quickly. I was here 2 weeks ago, if you'll recall, with some engineering plans relating to the installation of a solar panel or photovoltaic system at the Lowell Regional Water Utility Treatment Facility at 815 Pawtucket Boulevard. It's part of a number of projects that are being funded through the State Revolving Fund Loan Program. The city was fortunate enough to get 2% loan funding on this, which really makes this a really attractive financial package for the city. And based on the size of the system, which is about 500 kilowatts, we estimate that it will actually be generating revenue for the city as a result of the state's solar renewable energy credit program.
Mr. Little, if I could just interrupt you for a second. Let me just formally call this. It's a notice of intent continued from a prior hearing, Lowell Regional Water Utility, concerning DEP file number 206, and I know we have a number on this, 06...
686.
0668. So 206-0668. Okay.
No,
The project location is
me.
815 Pawtucket Boulevard, and it's the installation of solar photovoltaic PV solar panels at the water treatment facility, and includes both roof and ground-mounted solar arrays, and approximately 22,900 square feet of area and bordering land subject to flooding will be altered to accommodate the ground-mounted arrays. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much. It was suggested that we bring a brief PowerPoint presentation. I'd like to run through these slides. All of this is information that was submitted in your package last week as part of the resubmittal. We've done a number of things to accommodate the Conservation Commission's concerns regarding flood storage volume. All your points were well taken. We are truly trying to be good neighbors. We think it's a great project for the city, and certainly providing additional flood storage volume is part of that philosophy. This, if you'll recall, last time we were here, we had an aerial photo as the background for the engineering plan that was submitted to the commission. We've swapped that out as requested for a topographic plan showing the contours in the area. The flood storage, or I'm sorry, the 100-year flood elevation in the area is slightly over 101 feet USGS, which corresponds to 46 feet Lowell City base, so that there's about a 55.2 foot difference in the datum. So we've chosen to use Lowell City base for the design plans. The highlighted line there, the dark line, is the 46-foot elevation, so everything to the east or the right of that line and to the south of that line in the front yard of the facility are below the 100-year flood elevation. We've done a number of things to provide compensatory storage, or sufficient compensatory storage to more than make up for the volume of the racking system that will be taking up that volume. First and foremost, we've adjusted, instead of 2 rows of panels in the front yard, we've put in 3, adjusted the positioning of them a little bit. So as you can see, that top row in the front is actually outside of the floodplain. That leaves a number of arrays in the front yard below the floodplain, as well as in the back rear yard, which is really the northeast of the site. Everything, again, to the right of the heavy line is within the flood 100-year flood elevation. So what we've done is we've calculated the existing condition based on the existing contours. It's going to be very difficult to see there, but again, it was in the resubmittal package last week. So what we've got shaded there is the area between the 43 and 44 foot contours, 44 and 45, and 45 and 46 foot contours. So there's really 3 1 foot elevation bands within which we're trying to provide that compensatory storage. To provide additional storage volume, we've pushed those existing grades to the left or the west, closer to the higher elevation on the left of that plan there. and then recalculated the amount of flood storage volume that provides, again, within each elevation band, because I know you can't simply dig a big hole on the side to provide that. It has to be provided at the same elevations. For comparison purposes, that's just a slide showing the existing and proposed on the same plan. And really, I think the important thing to note here is the amount of additional storage that has been provided. Again, on the left-hand side of that table are the elevation bands. With the existing grading, you'll see the amount of flood storage volume in cubic feet. After the proposed regrading is the next column, and you can see, for instance, between the 43 and 44-foot contours, we're increasing by about 4,000 to 5,000 cubic feet of additional storage based on that regrading. We can't simply calculate flood storage volume based on the regrading. We have to subtract out the volume of the actual racking system and ballast piers that keep the photovoltaic panels from flipping over in wind events. If you remember last week, the city engineer had noted in her comments that each one of the ballast blocks took up approximately 9 cubic feet. That's accurate. There are 3 of those ballast piers per rack, so essentially 27 cubic feet. We've added about 15% for hardware within that calculation. Again, you have a more detailed version in the calculations that were submitted to you. So we've taken up calculated the entire volume of those concrete piers, the hardware that's anticipated beyond that. It's based on a very conservative manufacturer. Again, we can't limit the manufacturers through the specs because of mass procurement law, but this was a fairly conservative design to start with. We've taken that grand total and doubled it. So there's essentially 100% contingency on the actual volume taken up by the rack support systems themselves. So when you do the math, you have, again, in that top row, just under 10,000 cubic feet of storage at that elevation as compared to about 5,200 prior. We subtract out the volume taken up by the racking system of 630, and the final amount of additional storage provided at that elevation is 4,054 cubic feet. At the next elevation up, the 44 to 45-foot contour is about 4,700 feet additional, and between 45 and 46 was 327 cubic feet additional. I have a copy of the flood insurance, the firm map that we got to, that we used to determine the actual flood elevation, the 100-year flood elevation in that area. As backup, that's also been provided to you. Certainly happy to answer any questions you might have.
Thank you. I don't have any. Commissioner Lovely?
No questions.
Commissioner Varnum?
I have no questions.
Commissioner Moore? Craig, do we have anything that came in from the engineers?
The city engineer responded to the initial proposal in such a way that her feedback, I felt, was well incorporated into the commission's response at the first hearing. I didn't see any outstanding items that were not addressed through these updated plans, and with the information we managed to work through many of the issues, and the outstanding element, as correctly identified by the commission, in my opinion, was the flood storage issue,
right,
which, according to this information, which is at least addressed through this information.
All right. Is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments or concerns regarding this project?
Thank you.
John Hamblett, 495 Vernon Avenue, co-chair of the Pawtucketville Citizens Council. I'm representing the council this evening. We've had several conversations with Rob and Woodward and Kern over the last 2 weeks. We consider them a great example of a good neighborhood partner. It's a green, sustainable energy source that generates revenues for the city and creates 5 to 10 times the flood storage area compared to the fill. This probably is the official launch of the Pawtucketville Good Neighbor Policy, where you can be sure in the future we'll be asking all Conservation Commission applicants with similar situations to exceed the compensation requirements. We wholeheartedly support the proposal.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here who would like to offer their comments or concerns regarding this project? Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns regarding this project? All right. I'd like to say, Mr. Little, and through you to Regional Wastewater Utility, thank you for getting this information back to us as quickly as you did. It was I suppose from an engineering standpoint, probably not super heavy lifting, but still a lot of work that needed to be done. And you know, I appreciate, you know, I'm looking at this and looking at the amounts of fill that were brought in, and then the cuts, and I appreciate the excess that was provided. It's always good, especially in that particular neighborhood, to see, you know, excess storage provided at those critical elevations. If there's no other comments or discussion, yes.
I would like to potentially amend my previous statement. I just looked through the engineer's comments quickly. The one item that has not been mentioned here, and I apologize, as I was not at the last meeting and didn't review in detail the recording. It's unclear to me if you had discussed a construction plan. The engineer had made it clear she'd like to see more detail on the construction phase conditions, and that's something that can be worked out as that time approaches, and it may or may not be of interest to the commission to explore that.
All right, and let me see if I understand that. As far as they want more detail with respect to the actual solar panels and footings?
No, just a construction plan in that expected start date, contact person for site responsibility, stockpiling areas, and that, again, these are things that we have viewed sometimes at time of permitting, and sometimes these have worked well to be submitted at a later date when construction is planned and the time is approaching.
Correct me if I'm wrong, I believe those are part of our standard order, aren't they, already?
Yes, but it did not, I wasn't sure if the commission wanted to bring that up in any particular detail. Again, you'd ask for feedback from the engineer. I wanted to double check and provide that to you.
All right, yeah, I mean, there's probably a laundry list of at least 2 dozen or a dozen and a half standard conditions that attach to a Lowell standard order, assuming it's going that way. So, and I think most of those are addressed, which you'll get when you receive, if and when you receive an order. Without any further comments, is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns? All right, do I have a motion to close the public hearing?
I'll offer a motion to close the public hearing.
Second.
By Commissioner Moore. Any discussion? All in favor? Any opposed? The ayes have it. And we can proceed at this point in time, either permitting this or not, so.
Great. Thank you very much.
I'd move to issue a Lowell standard order on this.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor signify by saying aye. Commissioner Lovely?
Aye.
Commissioner Varnum?
Aye.
Chair is yes. Commissioner Moore?
Aye.
Okay, the ayes have it. Good luck, and just keep in touch with Craig with respect to, you'll get the list, it will be in the order of conditions as to the requirements, but especially with respect to the engineer's comments.
Yeah, we plan to keep in touch with the city engineer and the DPD throughout the project.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Moving on, next item on the agenda is a notice of intent continued from prior hearings, Samkan Kun, Community of Khmer Buddhist Monks, Inc., concerning DEP file number 2060685. Project location is 48 and 104 Townsend Avenue, 800.1 and 810 Varnum Avenue. After the fact filing for clearing temporary structures and mobile home installation and bordering land subject to flooding, 1% floodplain.
This is the same plan that you have, but elevated makes it a little bit easier to see the surface areas and some of the details.
Before we get started into this plan, what are the changes on this? Because this plan is neither signed nor stamped. And what are the changes on this with respect to the plan that we're reviewing at the site visit on Saturday, this past Saturday?
There are no changes on that plan. That's the identical plan. We did have the surveyor go out there, get some additional shots and add some spot grades after the commission requested that on Saturday, but we just submitted that plan. The spot grades and topography hasn't changed by any substantial amount. It just adds some more detail to it. But that's not reflected in the plan that you have. We just received that plan yesterday.
All right, we'll get into that a little bit, but you have to understand that the commission's gonna need some time to look at this. And, you know, whether we accept it for review tonight or this gets continued, I mean, generally, we don't accept submittals on the night of the hearing.
I understand.
yeah.
I appreciate that, and we don't like to give them out at night, but the commission requested that information on Saturday. We were lucky enough to be able to get the surveyor out there on Monday to work on it, and he finished that topography work and got the plan back to us just recently, so. But those changes aren't substantial. They don't really impact much of anything on this plan or on this design.
Now, and just as there's what you've just submitted, I'm looking at 4 plans, or 4 sheets. And I have one originally dated August 24th, 2011, with 3 revisions, the last one being February 7th of 2012, which I'm presuming is in response to the site plan, but that one is neither signed nor stamped.
The first plan you have reflects the removal of the tent areas.
Which one is that?
That's the top plan, dated 8/24/11, revised 2/7/12.
Okay. And that one's neither signed nor stamped. The next one,
The next one is the original plan that we had submitted to you, showing the tents that were present during the original survey that was since removed.
all right, and that one's C1.
That's correct.
And then we have C2, which I'm assuming is a detail.
C2 is an enlargement that the commission had asked for
Right.
at the previous hearing,
Okay.
so
And,
it makes it a little bit easier to see what's going on there.
all right, and then there's another C2 plan, and that's,
That's another enlargement showing the area of the trailer enlarged.
okay. And those are both enlargements from the C1 plan.
Right, those plans you've had for a while now.
Okay.
So the changes that you can see on the top plan reflect some spot grades that we've added for the old roadway or the remnants of the old road, the location of the remnants of the old road. And it's my understanding that the commission members were out there Saturday and saw that area.
Yeah, some, I believe everyone here was out there, so, yeah, and there was a couple of other additional members who were out there, but, yes.
There isn't much in the way of remains to the old road, but this is, you can see where it's located on the plan. It is not in the surveyed area where it is proposed to be, but that's not unusual for an older road. They quite often went off track. They didn't have it surveyed before they put it in. They just kind of knew approximately where it would go. So at the last hearing, the commission had asked that we clarify some of the grading on the 95 contour. There was some labels on there that were obscuring the connections between the topo. We removed that labeling, clarified that area of contours, removed the tents that were previously out there when it was originally surveyed and that are no longer in that place. The temporary temple is still in place, and the proposal for the trailer on the property is unchanged.
With respect to the site visit, are there any information supplied tonight? And again, with the understanding that one, we're going to need some signed and stamped plans.
Absolutely, not a problem.
But two, I'll let the individual commissioners comment on whether or not they need more time to review the submittal that was done tonight. But with respect to the site visit and the open issues that were continued from prior hearings, are there any questions from the commission? Commissioner Lovely?
There were, excuse me, there were a number of different things that were brought up at the last hearing. Things such as whether or not, placement of the gravel where the temporary trailer was to be sited, would that, constitute a filling? I don't believe that's the case, based on what we heard at the last meeting where, greater porosity from the gravel, that would be replacing any soil that was in the area. There were comments that were brought up about the historic dumping that took out in certain portions out there, and upon the walk out there, I certainly saw a bunch of glass bottles and remnants of shoe soles and things of that nature. Did not see anything related to what I would believe to be hazardous materials, oil spills, or things of that nature. At this point, Craig, I'm not sure, as the city's, I don't know what the title would be, environmental officer's comments been entered into the record? Because I think they corroborate the comment I just made.
I don't believe they have at this point.
Would this be the time to do that? Well, I don't know how we do that. Would we read them into the record, or just enter them into the record? I mean, upon, just looking at the memo that was shared from the Sarah Brown, the city's environmental officer, they too, Sarah, did a site visit of the property, with an emphasis on the area where there was some historic dumping, and also did not see any evidence of oil or hazardous material release, and that they too concur that, just the fact that there's solid waste out there, or, bottles and things like soles of shoes, that does not constitute a reportable condition under Mass DEP regulations, according to what Sarah Brown is saying. So I think, from my perspective, that issue's been addressed. With regard to the Cemetery Road, I think there's been an ongoing debate as to whether or not, is it a paper road or a real road? Certainly, I can tell you from the walk out there, it's the remnants of a real road. We did see the, the old footbridge overcrossing the old bridge overcrossing Clay Pit Brook. That being said, I would defer to legal counsel to determine whether or not it's truly a real road or a paper road. With regard to the clearing out there, there was certainly quite a bit of past clearing along the old cemetery road with brush piled along the sides. I gotta say, at least it looks neat out there, but that being said, there was some clearing done beforehand. Whether or not that would constitute any sort of quote-unquote fill to offset any, that would require flood storage compensation, I would tend to think the answer is no, given the, even if you were to put all that into a pile, I mean, the amount of void space you would have from debris, I would not think that would constitute a filling. I guess there is the question of whether or not something needs to be done with those piles.
We'd like to take them off-site,
Yeah.
but we had a stop work order, as you're aware, and we're just waiting for permission for the commission to get back in there and complete the remainder
Quite a
of
bit
the
out
work.
there. Would that be everything that's been cleared thus far?
I'm sorry?
There's quite a bit of debris out, vegetative, brush cover that's stockpiled. Would that all be taken out?
We'll take it all out and chip it and crush it,
Okay.
get it off-site.
So, I guess from my point of view, we've been having this conversation now for a number of hearings. I think sometimes, myself included, we somewhat confuse the earlier hearing on the notice of resource area determination with the subsequent notice of intent. I'm feeling like we're getting to the point where we should be really making a determination, certainly wait until we actually get stamped and approved plans, but really focusing on whether or not it makes sense to move ahead with the issuance of the notice of intent with consideration as to whether or not such issuance would have an adverse impact to the resource. In other words, trying to really narrow the discussion to the subject at hand. And I guess the last thing, just for clarification, is my understanding is none of the proposed work with the vegetative clearing or the placement of the trailer would change and result in any grade changes on the property. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So I guess I'll wait to hear from what my colleagues here on the commission, but I'm of the opinion that we could probably start to narrow the discussion more towards whether or not it makes sense to move forward with the notice of intent and issuance of an order of conditions, notwithstanding the need to get engineered plans. Thank you.
Commissioner Varnum?
I was on the latest site walk as well, and the engineer and the surveyor of the plans were out there with us. There has been some additional information submitted just tonight, which I really haven't had a chance to look at carefully. It seems that some spot grades and some extraneous items like the tents have been removed from the plans. But I'm still not seeing the type of revision that I was hoping to see when there was a second visit out there. I guess the third thing that was changed was they indicated the road location as it exists now, and stated that it was not in the roadway that was indicated on their original plan in part. I looked up some of the plan references just out of curiosity that were listed on the front of the plan, and one of them actually shows the road as changing course slightly 2 or 3 times in that strip along there. So I think it probably depends on which plan you used as your reference, whether or not the road deviated from that. And it seemed to me that the most logical thing to do would be just to indicate where the road is now, rather than try to second guess somebody who made a plan many years ago and perhaps ran into the same type of jungle that these gentlemen ran into the first time they went out there to try to survey. I just consider the plan, the original background plan, to be a very important part of this project. They're talking about a construction trailer in their proposal tonight, and I've heard that the plan is to construct a fairly significant structure out there in the near future. And I think that this plan that if we approve this plan that has been submitted, that's going to be the basis for every other notice of intent that comes in for future construction. I'm just not feeling too positive about the topography that's listed on this plan. I know we've got some additional spot grades now, but I would think it's very difficult to go out and try to modify a plan on a project of this size. On the other hand, it's very important to have the entire site correct as far as topography goes, because I'm sure that this 10 acres is going to be used for something more than a construction trailer at some point. And if you start with something that you're not confident with, I think it probably only gets worse going forward. And the reason that the topography is so important is the issue of compensation. We may not need compensation for a construction trailer. It may be 2 feet above the ground on wheels. But a temple or any kind of a building that's permanent is definitely going to need to be compensated for. I don't think that it's impossible to build on this site, but I think you need to be very, very careful of where you're getting your compensation from. And in order to be very, very careful, you really have to have perfect elevations on your base plan. To say that you're not going to be using this section or that section, I know that the corrections were only made in the 2 areas that the notice of intent addresses on this tonight. But 10 acres in Lowell, this is a big project to decide how 10 acres is going to be developed. And it requires a whole lot of very careful planning. Stabilization, I think, is an important consideration here. We have quite a bit of mud out there, And if that situation is going to be remedied, I think there is going to have to be a movement of fill here, there, and around before you can even put down grass or some kind of stabilization. I think the topography is important as well for the wildlife issue. In order to determine where the 10-year floodplain line lies, you need to have very exact topography, and that topography for that issue is further north on the site than any of the work has occurred to this point. But once again, if this plan is allowed to be accepted, then going forward, there's going to be very hard to dispute that something should be checked about the topography. I think this is our chance to get it right. And to that end, I'm of the inclination to ask for a peer review of the entire site for a new topographic study. I'm not disputing the work that has been done to this point, but I'm indicating that this is a complex site, that it was a very difficult site when the first survey was done due to vegetation and overgrowth, some of which has been removed now before it really had permission to be done so. And it's very, very difficult to go back, and it's like the teacher saying to you, well, it's okay, you know, you have a pretty good essay here, but go back and do it again. You know, you expended all of your effort the first time, and you really stand on that, and you don't want to look at it again. And I think that's why a second peer review process would be very, very helpful here. Not to prove anybody wrong, but to just be sure. And if there's a certain spot on the map where there's a discrepancy, it's treated the same way the wetland flagging was done. The two experts get together and decide, you know, where the midpoint of that discrepancy lies. But I'm very loath to go forward with anything on this project until the base topography on the map is rechecked in its entirety.
Commissioner Moore? Well, before that, is that a motion? I don't know.
I'll let other people say.
All right, Commissioner Moore?
Excuse me. So I am glad to see these additional spot grades out there. That helps me, at least in my understanding of the elevations, quite a lot, as well as the revised in the area where the road is planned and the road is reality sort of diverged the most near the temple site. Looking at the sequencing and relocation stuff, I see the sewer line is referenced in here. Is that still in the plan to actually run sewer out to the trailer?
That is still in the plans. We have some alternatives if necessary, but we do still have that in the plans as it stands right now.
Okay. And then just sort of on the relocation process as a whole, I mean, what's the estimated turnaround time and how quickly you could get through steps 2 through 8 of contacting an electrician, actually, you know, getting everything disconnected, getting the trailer moved out of there? Do you have any ballpark figures on that?
Within a couple hours, we could disconnect everything. We've got the contractors all lined up. They're all part of the Cambodian community. They're all people who are part of the organization, and we could get them in a very short period of time. In a couple hours, we could get everything disconnected and off the site.
Okay, so we could get an updated list of contractors?
Yes.
Those are still blanks in here. Okay. And just in terms of the technicalities of that, are those special quick disconnects or something, or standard connections that you're just
Standard
gonna depend on
connections.
getting them out there quickly
Yeah,
to?
there's nothing particularly unusual about it. You disconnect the electrical, shut off the power at the pole, disconnect the electrical sewer line, you just disconnect the pipe, cap the inlet, and water line, pretty much the same thing. You just shut off the water, there's a shut off right at the street, you shut it off and you disconnect the line, and you're ready to drive away.
Okay, and I think probably what concerns me equally equal to the start to finish time for this is how do you decide when to start? I mean, do you have a point at which where if you see water at such and such a location, that's your signal to get things moving? What's the plan to approach that?
We haven't set a particular standard for that, but if the commission wanted to condition it so that, say if there was 6 inches of water in the area, the trailer would be moved, or something along that line, we wouldn't be averse to that.
Yeah, that's something I'd be interested in, just so that there is a particular standard. If whoever has assumed responsibility for the trailer is unavailable that day, so someone else knows, look here, that's your point of reference for when to get the process started. That's something I'd like to see at any rate.
We do think that people are going to be on the site virtually all the time, so, if there's a flood emergency coming up, they should easily be aware of it. They're inhabiting the house, they'll be inhabiting part of the trailer, and so there are going to be people there. It's not like it's going to be an abandoned
Right.
type of structure.
Oh, no, I know that, but, it's just good to get everybody on the same page. But I think that was all I had. Thank you.
All right, some of my concerns have been touched on already, and I just want to go into them with a little bit more detail. With respect to, just refresh my memory, Mr. Erickson, on Plan C1, we have the brown shaded crossed hatch area, brown colored. That is area that was to be gravelled in to stabilize the ground? It shows...
Yes, that's correct. That would be area we expect to take out approximately 1 foot of topsoil, replace it with crushed stone
Okay.
as a base.
Okay, all right. How about where the temple is toward the east, across the old road, or the remnants of the old road? There was a cleared area there. What are you proposing to do to stabilize that area?
We're going to seed that area.
Okay. I concur. I would like those slash piles removed. I understand that perhaps some of them are serving some sort of function or some sort of traditional function, perhaps now. From when we did the site walk, there was some discussion. But I mean, to the extent, I suppose, that it serves a traditional or a cultural type function, I wouldn't be overly enthusiastic about removing them or allowing them to remain for that particular purpose. But there was a lot of other ones that could easily be cleaned up and removed.
They're not there for any particular function. The community had already asked me if they could start removing that material, and I said, don't do anything on the site until we get the enforcement order lifted and we have permission to work on the property.
Okay. With respect to Commissioner Moore's questions regarding the quick disconnects of the various tie-ins that the trailer would need, and I know you're an environmental scientist, none of those questions are within your area of expertise, and none of the answers are either. I, for one, would like some sort of expanded written detail, at least as to, one, who the contact person would be, and there should only be one, perhaps with two alternates in case the one contact person for some reason fails. you know, given the quick and the emergency nature that this would have to be utilized. I, for one, would like, one, a contact person, but two, some detail as to the nature of the connects and the nature, it being sewer, water, electrical, utility, all the connects, and the nature of, you know, how the initial contractor is connecting them, and what manner of disconnect can be utilized. You know, and it could just be, you know, it's a standard building type procedure to utilize in that situation. But I think we need some either written or engineered description of the type of connection, just to satisfy the commission and at least my curiosity and our obligation to make sure that in fact those can be quickly disconnected and the trailer can be quickly removed. I'm still of the opinion, without that, you know, this is not a construction trailer. It's something more permanent. It's going to be more difficult to remove. If you can provide that information, I'll certainly take, at least for my own sake, take a second look at it, and perhaps my own concerns will be allayed as to whether or not this can in fact be moved out quickly. But I'm not seeing yet any details, and I understand your comments, and I'm not doubting that they're not true. But I also understand, Ms. Erickson, I've known you for a number of years. It's beyond, and you're usually the first one to point out, you know, that's beyond your area of expertise. So
Actually, I'm a licensed construction supervisor, along with my other licenses, so I have a strong familiarity with that.
Okay, then,
You're
so-
right, I'm not a licensed plumber, I'm not a licensed electrician, but I am a licensed construction supervisor,
so
and they
then-
don't give that away either.
So then these details perhaps then can be provided through you, or you can provide them through a third party.
Absolutely, we will have the contractors put together something on that if you like.
But along with that, with Commissioner Moore's concerns, and they are my own also, is I would like, you know, one, a list of contact people such that the city has someone to contact, you know, a primary with at least two alternates that have the authority to give the order to disconnect and remove.
The main contact person is Sam Khan. He is shown as the applicant on this proposal. He would be the person that would be contacted for the most part. And beyond that, we can get you the names and addresses and telephone numbers of the contractors themselves.
Okay, but you know, I mean, life happens in the meantime. People take vacations, and you know, people get ill. People are away on business. I mean, life happens, and no one is available 24/7. And
understand. You wanna be sure.
Floods
Makes sense.
happen to not really care when people are on vacation and are otherwise unavailable. So they just kind of happen. Also, with respect to that, it's been it's been characterized as a construction trailer. There's obviously, we've heard testimony that it will be used as somewhat of a temporary shelter for the next at least several months. I suppose I'd like an N number on that. I'd like to know how temporary it's going to be. And and I'm not saying that, you know, you can only be there for 6 months, you can only be there for a year. I just like a number. I'd like to know what the immediate plans are and how long you intend to utilize that.
It's a little difficult to do that right now because we do intend to use it for a construction trailer when additional work is planned on the property, but we haven't started that work yet. We need a lot of engineering, a lot of architectural work, and a lot more to be done before we do that. And we will be back here for additional construction on the property. But until we have the plans and make the approvals, and then we don't know how long the construction would take. So we're kind of guessing. We can put an arbitrary figure on it, but we're guessing because we do intend to use it as a construction trailer during the construction of some kind of a structure on the building.
A project such as this generally has some sort of timeline. It can't be that open-ended, and you understand that an order of conditions in this particular case is good for, under the law, 3 years. Now, this is, again, assuming this were to be permitted, the trailer is there. What happens, what happens at 2 years, 10 months, 2 years, 11 months, 3 years, if and when the trailer perhaps is still there? You're going to be left in a situation where perhaps the commission issues an enforcement order for its immediate removal. That's that's a situation I don't think you want to put your client in, and that's what I'm getting at. There's got to be some sort of timeline here.
If the commission wants to put a 1-year limitation on the order of conditions with the opportunity to renew that if necessary, that would be fine.
Oh, I have no problem. I have no problem with the 3 years. I'm just saying I'm still struggling with the idea that this is a construction vehicle. It to me seems to be a way to get around providing compensation for filling a floodplain, and with that in mind, and given the fact that we can be provided with the details as to its portability, that would allay, at least for me, a lot of those fears. But I would think that the goal of the community would be to establish some sort of permanency on this site. It seems to be developable. It's when I walked it, I was just amazed as to the nature of the site. You just don't see things like this in the city anymore. I mean, you walk the site and you're like, are we still in the city of Lowell here? It seems to me that there would be some goal, at least from the community, and I understand that there is, to start to develop the site, but you don't want to see a situation develop where the site is constantly under construction. You kind of want to put some sort of finality and some sort of end time to when you start and end and shoot for that goal. So we're not having a continuously disturbed site, that we can stabilize it at some point. We can, put a sign out front and say, hey, come visit us. We have a beautiful site now. And we've stabilized it. We've met all the requirements that we're obligated to meet under at least for us, under the Wetlands Protection Act and the city bylaw. But, I don't, that's why I'm asking for some sort of timeline here as to, what you, when you plan to end this. I don't want to put some sort of artificial, like you said, just put a year. I don't want to do that, because that could unnecessarily tie your hands too. And then you're just back before us in a year, and having to, repeat the process, or at least extend the process, where it really perhaps doesn't need to be done. And, we could handle it at this point in time. Which at least for me, would be much more desirable. The other comment I wanted to make is, what is the flood elevation on this site?
It's approximately 100 on the westerly side of the property, and something like 99, I believe, on the easterly side of the property.
So it does change depending on...
Yes, it does.
Okay.
It is a studied floodplain, so when we're in the design stages, we will be using the higher floodplain.
All right, and I understand that, I appreciate the spot grades. I noticed that some of them don't necessarily agree with the elevations as drawn, but for the most part, the elevations as drawn seem to be below the spot grades, which, correct me if I'm wrong, is more of a conservative drawing. I would be more troubled if it was the other way around, meaning the spot grades were lower than the lines. The spot grades seem to correspond for the most part with the lines. I know it's not an exact science when you're out there, and from walking the site, I really appreciate the trouble that you must have gone through to even get some of these lines.
Unfortunately, most of the property is within the floodplain. We're aware of that, so we are going to have to compensate. We've got a long way to go for the design process for a structure. We've got a long way to go for the construction process, and for the approval process. So it's extremely difficult to give an exact time frame right now. If we could do it by next year, we'd be happy to, but it doesn't seem likely at this point.
I had one other comment that Commissioner Lovely brought up, and we did receive a memo from Sarah Brown, the city's environmental officer, with respect to the requested review, or whether or not a 21E site review was necessary. I'd just like to identify it, I guess, more particularly for the record. It's a memo dated February 2nd, 2012, from Sarah Brown, the environmental officer, to Craig Thomas, the assistant planner for the Conservation Commission. And I suppose, I don't think we need to make a motion to accept this. We can just accept this for the file. It's part of the public record. I'm satisfied with the information that's provided in it, and that satisfies my curiosity with respect to the condition of the site on that particular issue. How long do you think? Well, two things. One is it's necessary that we get signed and stamped plans, obviously.
Absolutely.
And the second thing is, how long do you think it would take to respond to the concerns of the commissioners, with especially Commissioner Moore's comments regarding contact persons, contractor information, and my concerns with respect to details?
Well, we have the main contact, SamCon, and all we have to do is get you the names of the actual contractors. That will take no time at all. The members of the community, SamCon, can give that to you probably tomorrow. You could put that in the order of conditions, or you could request that before you actually issue the order of conditions, and we can have it to you within a couple of days. If you'd like to see a contract for those employees, we could do that.
I think we can discuss that. I'm not too. At least for me, I'm not sure how the commission would want to handle that. I for one, in the back of my mind, had thought of requiring perhaps a small bond in order that if the city had to step in and do it, that the work could be done through the city if it wasn't done through the community. But
That would be acceptable. It's not an expensive process.
I'm throwing that out there. I had the thought.
We understand your
I'm not
concerns.
asking for a motion
They're
for it.
legitimate concerns.
I mean, it's a legitimate concern. There's other projects, there's other bigger concerns that I have. That's not really one I'm just throwing it out there.
Mr. Chairman? just a couple of suggestions,
Yep.
along the same vein. Hearing what we've been hearing for the last few meetings about this notice of intent, I mean, I put it in the category of the scope of work is, addressing the clearing of vegetation along the pathway to the temporary temple, and then the placement of a temporary trailer. We've been told that there's no change in flood storage. The grades are going to stay the same. There's no change in flood storage for this scope of the project. Of course, that may change for the larger scope, and again, this gets into my comment of trying to be clear of what we're talking about, the task at hand, which is the trailer and the clearing along the cemetery road. I would suggest something for the commission to consider is, looking at, as part of a standard order of conditions, some special conditions that would focus on, maybe at this point, at least getting prior to approving the project to move forward, maybe looking at an outline for a landscape and erosion control plan that would address some of the things that you've already suggested that your client's willing to do, Mr. Erickson, doing the clearing of the cut-down vegetation, seeding and stabilization of areas where, there has been cleared so we don't have erosion in muddy areas. That would be one. The second one, what I would kind of call, you're probably familiar with this in your capacity of being a construction supervisor, some sort of contingency planning to deal with the possibility of a flooding event and the need to implement that plan to do the quick disconnects of the trailer, implement the notification process. You could outline that all in a table of contents for your contingency plan. And then the third thing I would suggest, to Commissioner Varnum's point, is I completely agree. At some point, this is going to serve as the base map for a potentially future request of the commission. So now's the time to get it right. But I'm of the opinion that we could probably, get those corrections done as part of either the approval or the order of conditions. And so I guess for the commission, I offer the suggestion that maybe we think of getting some sort of outline for those three types of deliverables, discuss it at the next meeting, can have a continuance, discuss it at the next meeting, so then we can bring some sort of closure and glide path forward to this.
I want to address, at least just since we're in the discussion mode, and I'll open this up. And I know that's not a motion yet because we haven't closed the hearing yet, but I, for one, would like to stay focused on the fact that this is an after-the-fact order for work already done and just to stabilize the site and to stay focused on that. I understand that at some point in time there will be a subsequent filing for future work to be done on the site with more permanent structures. I would, in that regard, with respect to Commissioner Varnum's concerns and your concerns, that we accept, or I'd feel more comfortable just accepting this plan with the grades as shown just for the sole purpose of this particular project, with the understanding that if and when you come back before us for more permanent structures or more site development, that at that point in time, we will require and we will ask for detailed elevations with on-site, with spot grades and sufficient spot grades to identify where any filling will be happening, any site regrading will be happening, and any cuts will be made for compensation. Again, I appreciate this is a huge site, and I know, Mr. Close, I recognize that you're here. I don't know how much time you spent out there. I'm assuming it was several days, perhaps even more than a week. If you could answer that, I don't know.
Yes, Ron Close, for the record, the site engineer. Yes, throughout the summer we were out there, and through the fall, I don't know, maybe total of 3 solid weeks of actual work,
Right.
if you piled them up. We were recently, right after that meeting, we went back in Monday, did an additional 40 shots out there, plus or minus. I got the plotter Monday through Tuesday, after coming home from work. I got on a computer, plotted them, but I didn't have time to really run the, what we call the digital terrain modeling, the contour modeling.
All right.
So all you have right now is, I understand Ms. Varnum's concern, all you have right now is really some quick adjustments in that corner, which was a critical corner, I think, that you were really looking at, where it was about a 4-foot difference in elevation. All I did was put the spot grades in there, tried to adjust it in by hand, but I got to run that back through, just didn't have the time. My land desk operator was, I think, the Super Bowl out of town or whatever.
Well, I guess what I'm driving at is,
Yes, we have more work to do there.
right, is that there's probably significantly more work to do, especially once you actually get into the situation where you are going to be planning on permanent structures and footings for those and grading for those and access to those and to meet with all sorts of, engineering requirements, with the city, with, just, water quality, runoff, all of that type of situations that need to be dealt with at that particular time. I just, Mr. Erickson, want you to understand that at least what I would like to do is just to go forward with this particular phase and accept these plans just for this particular phase, with the understanding that if and when you come back with more permanent structures or more detailed plans for the ultimate build-out, or at least for whatever you're planning next, that at that point in time, you provide us with the details of the areas that you intend to disturb.
I think a detailed peer review of the future filing for a permanent structure is a perfectly reasonable request. I don't have a problem
I'd
with
like,
that at all.
I'd like to just put some closure to this. I think we've looked at it and had it under the magnifying glass for quite some time now, and I for one am comfortable. We need stamp plans for one. I don't know how the rest of the commission wants to handle that, but I'm comfortable that you will supply us with the information we've requested with respect to the trailer and the connections and how those can be done. You're not going anywhere, so to speak. I know you're not going to skip town. That's what I'm getting at. But and again, I don't know how the commission wants to handle the lack of a stamp plan. I mean, it's.
Mr. Close can have one in the office tomorrow.
I know they're interlined with Mr. Leo White's name, and he's not here right now. So, I would suggest he could do it right now, but at least have one for the board, but for the commission. But he's not here. What I would like to do, if there are any other comments right now from the commission, I don't know if there are. Commissioner Lovely, Commissioner Varnum.
The reason I suggested this would be a good time for an additional survey was because of the condition of the site right now. And should your additional plans come in the summer, we face a situation such as Mr. Close had last year with extreme vegetation out there.
Yes, ma'am. Like I said, we haven't finished the plan. I understand your concerns. What you have now is just spot grades that we shot the other day, but we have a total of about 40 more shots right in that general area to clear that problem up. So it should come up on the modeling. That is when we punch it into the computer and let the computer remodel that section. So it gives it more definition. And we'll have the plan stamped tomorrow.
Commissioner Moore? Is there anyone here who would like to offer their comments or concerns regarding this project? And I want to make two comments. One, obviously introduce yourself for the record, please, your name and your address. But the second comment is if you spoke at the last hearing or one of the prior hearings and all you're going to do is repeat what you've said before, we have a lot of people here, not as many as we've had in past meetings, but you've already entered your information for the record. If you have something new to address or something, and I'm not trying to discourage anyone from speaking, but it's just, we have your comments for the record. Or if you have anything to discuss with respect to what's been discussed tonight, or hasn't been commented from anything that we've discussed at a prior meeting, then I'd certainly invite you to come up, introduce yourself for the record, and let us know your concerns.
For the record, my name is Ed Walsh, 297 Pawtucket Boulevard, representing the Kemmer monks. Sitting with Mr. Khan. Mr. Khan is probably the #1 contact, and I'll be the second contact for emergency on that site. The area that we have out there on where the trailer and so forth is located, we'd like to, if the commission and so forth allows, to be able to turn around and grade the area where the house is. They're going to eliminate, right now, Mr. Khan says they'll eliminate running sewage. They're just going to run electricity. They need a meeting place. So if they can get this site, so we can get the trailer on the site, and they'll eliminate the sewage right now, and they'll just have electricity hooked up to the trailer, so they'll have the heat in there, and a meeting place, because they're in dire need of a meeting place. They're meeting at Dunkin' Donuts and so forth. It's very difficult to have a group. So, speaking with Mr. Khan, if we can get that area on 48 and 50 Townsend graded back, and we put crushed stone in that area just so that they won't have mud, they'll have parking, and the parking won't be out on the street. It'll be back in the area, and we intend to clean up, if we get permission, to take down the trees right in behind the house, take the stumps out, and take all that brush and remove all the brush so that we have room to get in there, and then we'll remove all the brush that's on the site and get it off there so there'll be no problem with fire or anything else, if that's possible. But tonight, if we can get permission to, through the chairman, put that trailer in there, that's a big thing. They're going to eliminate the sewage right now. They're going to, don't even worry about that. It's only, they probably get 6 months a year for the trailer. So they're not going to, they have a house there. They have facilities in the house, if that's possible.
Well, Mr. Walsh, that would be part of, assuming an order issued, that would be part of the order, and then, as you know, it has to go through the 20-day appeal period and whatnot. So, I mean, we can't just sit here and say, yeah, go ahead and start tomorrow.
I realize that.
We can't do that, so it's all part of the, it's all part of the process.
But we have to start somewhere and that's why they're going to eliminate the sewage.
Well, that's part of your proposal, so.
Right.
So that would be part of it. Is there anything else? Okay. Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns?
Samkhan Kun, 73 Bellevue, Lowell. I am the applicant for these applications. Subsequent to last hearing, we also had a brief meeting with Greg Thomas as well as the building commissioner on how to go about and to make sure that to certify the building code and how to put the trailer in place as well. And we'll get the the proper instruction as how to go about and do in the most doable ways and again less disturbing way to the area there. we understand that we're gonna also get the permission, pull the permit, the electrician's gonna pull the permit, the building code's gonna also pull the permit as well to get, the trailer in there.
Thank you. Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns?
No, I'm all set.
My name's John Hamblett, still, 495 Varnum Avenue, co-chair of the Pawtucketville Citizens Council. Lots of new information tonight. None of it we can comment on. The comments I'm about to make won't reflect any of the new information you've received. Also, as we've agreed with the city, whenever new information is presented at a meeting, we will ask for a continuance, and we're doing that at this time. We haven't had a chance to review at least a plan, and I understand there are comments from an environmental engineer. A month ago, when we last talked about this project, we had a 3-hour meeting, and at the end of that meeting, the representative for the applicant stated that you really needed to concentrate on 2 things: the clearing of the 37,000 square feet of vegetation in the floodplain and the impact of the trailer on the property. We disagree. We believe there are 14 things that need to be concerned about, and what I'd like to do now is pass out a piece of paper, ask that this be part of the paperwork that goes with this project, and use it as a discussion document. Item number 1, the neighborhood is asking about the consequences of unapproved clearing of 37,000 square feet of vegetation in the floodplain and the impact of this debris. There are 2 consequences. One is if the brush piles constitute fill in the floodplain, and if so, what is the solution to that? And the second is, initially we had discussed that the brush piles constitute a fire hazard. I don't think that question has ever been resolved. Whatever happened to the big wood chipper deal? About 3 months ago, we were talking about a wood chipper being on there, and we were going to chip wood, and something happened. We're concerned about erosion control measures that are necessary as a result of the clearing down to the bare ground. In particular, the neighborhood is concerned about the 2012 spring rains. They're coming in about a month. And we also seek a long-term remedy to erosion control. The impact of the notice of intent to place a trailer on the property in the floodplain raises a number of questions. The applicant has said this is a meeting house. Is it a meeting house? No. The new CKBM headquarters are at 48 Townsend Avenue. There's a house located there, and they're still using the temple in North Chelmsford. The temple in North Chelmsford has an upstairs temple and a downstairs temple, and we recently received correspondence from the downstairs temple that that's being used regularly upstairs. Is it a construction trailer? No, there is no construction. This is a suburban single-family zone. Trailers are not permitted unless they're construction trailers, so this is just a means to get around the zoning regulations. There's no construction planned under this notice of intent, and there's no need for a construction trailer. Is this for residential use? If it is, then it can't be occupied by any more than 3 unrelated individuals, and as far as we're concerned, they have to meet the same floodplain building requirements as the rest of the neighborhood, or we've been discriminated against. If no, then what is this trailer? If it's not a construction trailer, if it's not a meeting house, and if it's not for residential use. Our neighbors have asked, will the trailer float away and will it damage our homes? How is it secured? Will the trailer fill a flood storage space if it is secure? And will that worsen the flood damage to the neighborhood? We don't have access to what is underneath the trailer. We understand there's proposed fill. Will it need to be compensated? And if so, where and how? What are the consequences of incorrect topography and/or plans? The big question that's been asked is the topography on the plan correct? If after 6 months and 3 tries, this topography is still not correct, then we are requesting an independent review of the topography at this time. The single most important issue with the road is establishing property boundaries. Where are the boundaries of the adjacent properties? Are they at the sides of the road or the middle of the road? And the reason that's a key question is because it answers, can the road be used for compensation? We haven't seen the report from the city of Lowell, but we have concerns. We know the ownership of the land is in question, but we now hear the city of Lowell does not want to take responsibility for the road because of the additional expense of rebuilding a bridge and maintaining the road and the cemetery. Now, we've heard testimony that the city of Lowell removed the bridge over Clay Pit Brook in the 70s. So my question for the commission is, if declaring this parcel of land a road creates a financial burden for the city, is there not a conflict of interest? And so we're asking the city to comment on whether or not this is a road, yet they have an interest in it not being a road. As far as the unapproved structures in the floodplain, I'll start with the temporary temple. A question was asked by a commissioner in the last meeting, are structural timbers, pavers, and other cinder blocks included in compensation? And if so, what is the plan to create compensation? Can that compensation plan be developed before accurate topography of the parcels has been determined? Has the temporary temple been secured, or could it be moved by moving floodwaters? I have no idea, it's all wood. Number 7, the other unapproved structures in the floodplain. I understand that the newest plan shows no other structures in the floodplain. Have they all been removed? Have the plans been modified to show the correct size of the buildings? The last 2 or 3 meetings, that was a concern. Are the buildings allowed on the road? And if not, where are they being relocated to? Do setbacks apply? Have their structural timbers and foundation materials been included in compensation studies? Have the pathways made of concrete and similar materials been removed, or is there a plan of compensating for the loss of flood storage capacity? Compensation. We had the example in the case earlier tonight of our new good neighbor policy. Will we see flood storage compensation exceed the volume of the fill? General cleanup. Testimony has been given by abutters and by commissioners that the temple site's a mess. Can it be cleaned up? I know it's not a conservation issue. Can they also clean up 48 Townsend Avenue? There has been a violation of a state and local law. It occurred following a verbal stop order and a written cease and desist. It's been verified through witness statements and photographic evidence. What is the appropriate response? A wildlife study. There has been testimony that a protected habitat is a few hundred yards away, that deer use the parcel, and we now have a video of a flock of turkeys crossing over into 104 Townsend Avenue. There has not been an evaluation by a qualified wildlife specialist, and we request an independent wildlife study be conducted to determine if this is a wildlife corridor. How will the isolated vegetative wetlands be protected? And then there's the dump. On December 14th, the commission heard testimony that in the past the city removed all the topsoil, dumped 3 feet of trash, and covered it with sand. An officer from the city of Lowell, the assistant city manager, Lowell's environmental officer, and a conservation commissioner agreed that dumping had occurred. It appears to cover a very wide area, maybe as much as 2 acres. What are the conclusions in the environmental officer's report? Where is the report? Well, I understand it'll become public shortly. And what actions are required to remedy dumping in a wetlands, in a buffer zone, or in a floodplain? Can the city of Lowell be objective, or does the city face a liability for the cleanup? How is this potential conflict of interest resolved? So we request an independent soil test for toxicity. A further complication is that, in our opinion, the public disclosure on December 14th that there had been dumping was followed on December 22nd by the purchase of this land by the CKBM. And in the documents that I've looked at, the deed and mortgage documents, they've agreed to pay for all cleanup costs for any environmental damage. So who pays for the cleanup? The city of Lowell or CKBM? I understand and I realize we are asking for a number of independent studies, and we need to ask the question, is the request for additional independent studies a financial burden to the applicant? I can't answer that, but I can give you facts. On December 22nd, $1,250,000 was paid for property assessed at $728,000. That's a $500,000 premium for land in one of the worst property markets in the last 20 years. This group, the applicant, is currently raising $8,400,000 for this project. The studies we're requesting are a rounding error to the right side of the decimal compared to this kind of money. The Pawtuckaville Citizens Council had its regular monthly meeting on Monday. And I'm not going to say that the neighborhood is worried. I'm going to tell you the neighborhood is scared. 84,000 members, $8.4 million. The first building is going to be 20,000 square feet. Now we're not sure. The city is working hard. They've got a balance beam they've got to stay on and be fair to both sides. But are they going to be objective in two decisions they need to make? We know the side the applicant is going to take. And so we need clear, objective information so that you can make clear, objective decisions. We are relying on you. Thank you.
Since it invites comment, are there any questions to Mr. Hamblett from the commission?
I'd just like to make a comment.
Sure.
I mean, thank you for sharing these comments with us, but in looking at them, I maintain the position that a number of these comments, while valid, are for a later date, not specific to this notice of intent.
Okay.
I think they're important comments. I think there are a number of them you've probably heard echoed from us previously, but I do believe that when and if the applicant decides to move ahead beyond the notice of resource area determination, which started this process when we met back in, I think it was September, then we moved into this notice of intent, which was specific to the trailer and the clearing. I think these comments are valid and certainly can be revisited at that point in time, but I think, in being very objective, we need to make the distinction between what's being asked in front of us, which is this notice of intent for work that was done previously, versus work that may be done moving ahead. And I just wanted to make that as a comment.
Could I ask a follow-up question?
Certainly.
I saw a lot of these as being relevant to the notice of intent. Which ones do you think aren't?
In my own opinion, if we're not talking about changes in grade, if filling, if you're removing soil and putting in gravel, I would concur with Mr. Erickson's earlier characterization. You're creating additional pore space, so you're going to have more volume to store water. Second of all, while there is quite a bit of vegetative cover that has been taken down, I would argue that that is not offsetting any existing flood storage capability. An example I used to use in my career as an environmental professional, when you're taking hazardous waste off-site, the truckers love you to pay by the ton. Why? Because that's how much, they fill up their trucks, so much gallons per dollar. And it's very easy to validate, how much material weighs. Landfills, on the other hand, love you to charge you by the yard. They're paying for space. They don't care how much the material weighs. You're paying for, X volume of space in the landfill to put your waste in. The challenge with, you could certainly look to pay for waste by volume. The problem is if you're sending out a 60-yard truck and filling it with debris, or in this case, let's say, filling it with vegetative material, 60 yards, filling a truck to 60 yards isn't 60 yards of material. You have void space in there. You probably got 30, 40, maybe even 50% void space ratio, unless you're looking to maybe chip the material, wet it and compact it down, and then maybe you can get to the full volume, of the truck. I mention that because I view that what's out there from walking the site, in my own opinion, is being what I would consider to be a de minimis volume of fill, if any. And I would think any fill that would be the result of any clearing, even if the applicant left it on site, would be offset by the additional storage capacity you're gaining from putting in gravel where you had topsoil. And the applicant's already
This is
indicated.
just where the trailer is.
Yes, yeah, and the applicant indicated they'd be willing to remove, I agree with your opinion right here about the vegetative material. Certainly even, yes, it does. I think the greatest potential risk is a fire hazard, but my sense is that's beyond our jurisdiction as a commission. I would argue that it makes sense to remove it because as that material decays, there's phosphorus in those wood particles that adds nutrient loading, and if you know about runoff from your parking lots, that nutrient loading causes algal blooms in waterways. You deplete the oxygen in the water supply, and you have apoxic events which cause fish kills. So I think you could make an environmental argument, but I think the greater argument is the fire argument. And I think the applicants expressed a willingness to do this. Certainly those questions that you raised, I would ask those exact same questions again when we start looking at permanent structures, cuts, where are they looking to get the flood storage compensation if needed? Is it in the same geographic area or not? I think those are all valid things, but I think they're for a later date when and if the applicant decides to move forward with a plan to put in a permanent structure. And that's my opinion. I don't know if the other...
Thank you.
If I can turn on my microphone first. With respect to number 2 and the use of the trailer, we're not overly concerned with the use as, I mean that's for some other board in the city, not us. But I don't disagree with you that it constitutes fill, and that's thus we've spent the time and the effort and satisfying at least some of us on the commission that it's not a permanent and can be readily moved in a flood event. So that the temporary nature of it would need to be met and required and sustained in order for that to fall under the protection, at least of the Wetlands Protection Act, without providing any compensation. I would like to clarify the one point that, and I'm not sure I understood Mr. Erickson as having characterized the placement of gravel as opposed to what's there now, which is sort of a dense hydric soil, clay, sand, I don't know what it is. And Commissioner Lovely's comment that it's more, I suppose you said porous? Yeah, I just want to state a clear fact that if the grades are the same, if the finish grades are the same, that's the classic digging of a bathtub in a floodplain to provide compensation. You can't do it. And I don't think Mr. Erickson made that comment. I just want to, and I don't think he's relying on that. I just wanted to clear that up. It may be more porous, but it's certainly not something you can take credit for as far as being as far as it being compensation. And I'm not saying that you did. I'm just, the comments were made, and it could perhaps be misconstrued that way, and I just want to clear that up, that's not the case.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify, I mean, that wasn't my intent. The intent of the comment is you have more void space, air space to store water when you have things like gravel versus a clay compact material, less ability to store water. That was the intent of the comment.
Sure.
And I agree that some of the other comments would be more properly addressed as this goes forward. Again, this is sort of a limited notice of intent, and it's to permit work that's already been done and to stabilize the site. The only additional, at least as far as I can tell, work being proposed is just the situs of the trailer. So that's, at least to me, I would like to put some finality, at least to this aspect of what we've been meeting on, with the understanding that what you've outlined is not a concern to me. It is. Just not at this time for this particular phase of what we're here for at this time. I just want to make that clear. Are there any other questions for Mr. Hamblett? Do you have any other questions from the commission or
Not at this time.
concerns? Okay, thank you. Yeah, and I'd like to just, when we were out there on the site visit, I actually took some pictures. I counted 9 turkeys walking through as I was out there. I think, I don't know if anyone else observed them, but I got some nice video and pictures of them. So it's, I'm a long-time hunter, and I've never seen that many turkeys that close to me at one point in time, out in the wild. So it was kind of fun to see in the city of Lowell.
I'd just like to say that I think this document that Mr. Hamlin has presented sets forth a lot of good points. And I can agree that some of it doesn't apply to this particular notice of intent, but I'd also like to say that a lot of these things that I feel should be done are maybe something the applicant should be thinking about, because they're going to be taking some time, and to come back with a plan for your next phase and then have it drag on because things that were brought up at an earlier time haven't been done yet. It's sort of a warning here that I still feel topography needs to be rechecked, and I'm still in favor of a wildlife study, and I really think that the applicant themselves should be thinking about cleaning up that dump site. I certainly wouldn't want any person, especially children, to be put in danger by the condition out there. There could be conditions that if it were my land, I'd be wanting to know what's underneath, not just the glass that's on top. And I certainly think that's something they should be thinking about. There's a lot that's going to be considered. It's going to be a lot greater project if it's permanent. This is a temporary project, and perhaps some of these can be put on the back burner for a while, but, I mean, these are good questions that have been brought up, and they certainly need to be answered within the next filing.
Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns with regard to this project? Is there anyone else who would like to offer their comments or concerns with regard to this project? Is there anyone else? And before I request a motion to close the public hearing, how does the commission feel about the lack of a stamped plan? I'm not uncomfortable that we will get a stamped plan, but I don't recall a situation in my years on the commission where we've closed a public hearing without a certified plan.
We've had new information submitted tonight, and generally we don't close when that happens. We don't have a plan, and I think it's been brought up that the neighborhood hasn't received some of the information that the board has received yet.
Yeah, and that's a point well taken too. And I agree with that, and it skipped my mind. Thank you. You understand that it's just receiving this tonight. I think it's only fair in this process that since we're just looking at it now, that it's become part of the public record that everyone has an opportunity to review it. Not only us, but all. And since we need certified plans anyway.
I don't have a problem with that, and obviously we have no problem giving you a certified plan, but the differences between the plan that was submitted today are not significant because they don't impact the project. The project, remember, is for the installation of the trailer and the cutting of the material on the site, and the topography doesn't substantially impact that.
Okay, I guess it's more of a point of procedure and notice, Mr. Erickson, and we're just assuming arguendo, we were to close tonight and permit this tonight, you would be handing any opposition a valid and arguably very successful avenue of appeal.
I understand, and I don't like dropping a plan on you that late in the process. It was just necessary to accommodate what the commission was requesting on
No,
Saturday.
I understand, but I apologize for that skipping my mind, and thank you for bringing it up.
Chairman, if I may, there might be one way to review this. I can see that there's a lot of discussion about how to try and organize a timeline, and that there's been a fair amount of information received, and there are outstanding issues. One thing that is done by some other commissions, it's not typically done here because of the administrative support that I myself and others in the Department of Planning and Development provide, but could serve as a model, is a situation where again, were it to be the case that the commission were to decide they wanted to close the public hearing and try to issue a permit with the understanding that there's outstanding information, that could be moved tonight, also with the provision that at the next hearing, 2 weeks hence, the order of conditions is reviewed before it's issued. Again, so when the vote is taken, that starts the process for 21 days before the order must actually be issued, before the appeal period even begins. Many commissions use that time to draft the order of conditions in the way that, with more complex projects, to make sure the conditions are as proposed and receive any additional information.
When does the appeal period start?
Once the order is issued.
So that would be tonight.
Well, the vote is taken tonight, but the way it's typically done is the vote is taken once the public hearing is closed. And this is,
The order typically issues the following day, or
Yeah,
whenever the
yes.
administrator can
yeah, whenever,
actually
based-
type
as-
it out and
as soon
get
as
it
I,
out.
As soon as I can get it done. But it is the practice of some commissions, and I've looked into this a little bit. I believe it to be legal to hold the issuance of an order of conditions within that 21-day period to review it. Typically, that could be an administrative process, but it could come back before the commission again for review if that is a more comfortable option. Again, there are a lot of issues on the table here. That is simply one way to approach something of this nature.
Craig is right, the majority of commissions will close the hearing and issue the order of conditions, and vote on the order of conditions at the subsequent meeting.
Yeah, I understand what you're saying, and I know, Mr. Erickson, you're not exclusive to the Lowell Conservation Commission. I likewise, in my practice, have appeared before numerous other conservation commissions, and the practice that I most often see, which Mr. Thomas outlined, is one that I don't particularly like. And for the simple reason being is that the vote, or that and sometimes the deliberation, I think, strikes in the face of the open meeting law, where the order is held back pending further conditions on the order, and people are of the opinion that we've finalized, say for instance tonight, but in the meantime, over the next 2 weeks, prior to coming back for the next meeting, things are added to the order that weren't part of the deliberative process and part of the open meeting here.
Happens all the time.
No, I understand it happens all the time, and I don't like the practice. I just don't, I think it strikes in the face of the purpose of the open meeting and the purpose of meeting out issues.
I can see that perspective. I've been
And
the victim of it.
you know, this commission, at least as far as I've been on it, and it's been quite a while, has always, as you know, I mean, because you've been before us a number of times, you think at least once or twice before, huh? So I think this commission has always issued the permits and done the deliberation as part of the meeting proper, and the order goes out with as close in time as possible.
We understand, and if you feel it's necessary to continue because of that, then...
I understand now then what our administrator is proposing is that we close and vote, and that the order will not issue until a subsequent hearing. I suppose that can be done, but and the appeal period would not start, or would start tonight. Is that it, or would not start until the order is actually issued in 2 weeks?
It would start at the point where the order was technically released, which is the date of issuance. Again, the date
So
of...
in 2 weeks.
Whenever that
Okay,
time
so
would
what is the benefit to doing that? That's what I'm getting at.
It's an interesting question in that it's unclear to me at the time 2 weeks hence we would be discussing this. You're correct in that under that format it would not be a public hearing, but rather simply an administrative discussion. If any conditions, not conditions of the permit, but submission requirements had not been met, where that would place the commission, say, as has been requested, signed and stamped plans.
But the appeal period, it doesn't start until then. And if we were to continue this till the next meeting, basically the same process. But if the public hearing process was closed, if the meeting was closed and something were to happen in the next 2 weeks, some new information, especially with respect to the new plan came to light, and someone wanted to comment on that, they would be foreclosed in doing so.
Yes, to the extent that you're not required to take feedback on an administrative review. Again, though, as has been the practice of the commission for an application like an RDA, where it's technically a public meeting and not a public hearing, input can be taken from the public at large as a part of that process. I agree wholeheartedly in the distinction as to these two processes. This has been something that's been brought to my attention as a possibility. I know it's been outside the functioning of the commission. I didn't have the background as to your feeling, in particular, the way that that worked with the open meeting law, but I think it's an absolutely valid concern. It is, as Mr. Erickson indicated, used by many commissions, but again, this commission, mostly for the better, functions quite differently than many other commissions in the state, not least of which because you meet more often and have the availability to continue hearings from meeting to meeting and still issue permits in a timely fashion.
Yeah, I guess what I wanted to at least bring to light with that other practice and other commissions is, I'm not going to say it happens often, but it does happen where we get the order back with either a denial or an approval that's permitted with conditions on it or with reasons for denial that were never discussed in the meeting. And that became part of the deliberation that happened at some point in time without any input. And, those are grounds for appeal, but in the meantime, your client is hurt because if it's a denial, because now they're left with having to appeal an issue that was never discussed, or any opposition is harmed because, it's an economic harm at that point in time. We're here. It's an open meeting. It's a public meeting. Let's flesh out the issues now. Let's flesh out the issues now. Let's discuss them. That's what we're here for. I'd rather not, if the appeal period doesn't start for another 2 weeks because we're going to bring it back and just make sure we have A, B, and C done, let's continue it for 2 weeks. Give everyone an opportunity to look at the information that was provided, make comments on it if they don't feel any further comment needs to be made on it, fine. We can close the public hearing at that point in time and permit it at that point in time. I think that everyone here at least is kind of understanding that the commission perhaps is leaning towards permitting this. We've gone over this ad nauseum at this point in time. I think everyone sort of understands the direction that we're headed. But again, we have new information here. We don't have a certified plan, and we have new information that's been provided. I think there's been an active, which is somewhat unusual for our commission. There's been an active participation in this process, and it's great. Let's give everyone the opportunity to review the new stuff, even if it's a de minimis change. Let's give them the opportunity to review what has come in. So at this point in time, I'd entertain a motion to continue to the next. And there was, is there an issue with that? I believe we have some issue about a quorum. And Craig and I had a discussion earlier about scheduling for some of the commission members, and that's all. I'm bringing this up because of that.
It's honestly unclear. It's hard to say at the moment. We're at the minimum quorum threshold for this meeting. If this group or any others who've participated in this hearing in the past and missed a single meeting use the Mullen Rule acknowledgement, watch this video here tonight, and participate in future hearings, and that would not be a problem.
Okay. I just wanted to make sure perhaps then I misunderstood. I thought that we had some scheduling conflicts with some of the commission members that were already identified for the next hearing.
They do exist, yes.
Okay. Just so you and folks, the ones that are here, why don't we have a motion first? We have a motion to continue?
I'll offer a motion to continue.
At the request of the applicant?
Second.
Okay. And seconded by Commissioner Vaughn, a motion made by Commissioner Lovely. Any further discussion on that? All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? The ayes have it. Okay, just what I want, before we leave, I just want to let you know that there have been some identified prior to this meeting in discussions with the administrator, that there are some scheduling conflicts for the next meeting with some of the commission members. The current state law requires obviously a quorum, but that members that have been a part of the process, there's continuity, that those same members are. Now, there's remedies around if you've missed a meeting, you have to bring yourself up to date. And folks, whether you know it or not, all of these meetings are recorded. and they are available online, so you can look at them at any time. You have to go on the City of Lowell website, and eventually you'll find your way over to how to do that. But you can review these meetings online too. And that's how we commission members do it when we miss a meeting. We have to review the meeting online. The point I want to make is you may want to at least, Mr. Erickson, you may want to check with Mr. Thomas and Mr. Hamblett on behalf of the Pawtucket Citizens Council. You may want to check whether or not we're going to be ready to go for the next meeting, whether we have a quorum, because if we don't, this won't be, it won't be able to be discussed. Okay. All right. Thank you all for coming in. Moving on to other business, we have a review of a partial certificate of compliance issued for 900 Lawrence Street concerning DP file number 2060604, 604. I understand that the applicant lost the certificate of compliance that we issued and is requesting a duplicate or a confirmatory. And you have one prepared for us to sign?
Yes.
Yeah, I don't, and that's sort of an administrative, I mean, should we sign an extra one so we have two in the file?
Yeah, this is the reason, because I checked and we have one original to date in our file, and in all possible instances, I'm trying to keep original.
We have done this in the past where you make a photocopy of it and make a certification that's a true and accurate copy of the original, and they can record that.
You could do that.
We've done that in the past.
Yeah, I could do that in the future as an administrative step. I include it under other business. I wasn't trying to make this a point of discussion, simply to bring it up as an administrative proposal.
Are we comfortable in re-signing, and are the same parties present? Yeah, this was John Darling's.
2010.
Yeah.
What I would suggest, Craig, at this point in time is make a photocopy of it, and as administrator for the Conservation Commission, just make a certification, and the law department can give you one. Or you can call over to the Registry of Deeds. Dick Howe Jr. will supply you with one, or you can contact me, I'll give you one. It's just a certificate of true copy, and that can be recorded. They have to pay an extra fee for that, but that's their problem. They're the ones who lost the document, so.
Yeah, and it may have to be certified by the clerk in this instance as well. I'll look into that and figure it out.
I think you can do it as the administrator, because are you the keeper of the records for the commission, or is the clerk the keeper of the records?
That's a good question. I'm empowered to act on behalf of the commission. I'm not certain about the power of the keeper of the records.
I know in the past, I think we did it with Sarah Brown, and I'm pretty sure that she signed it, but I mean, Mr. Geary, our new clerk, could certainly do it. I mean, that's a technical question, but I think either you or the clerk's office would be able to do that. I don't particularly see any great problem with it, as long as it's a true and accurate copy of the original.
Yeah, then I can take care of that. I simply wanted to bring it to the commission's attention.
All right. Moving, and I know Mr. Hamblett is staying, and this is something that we've discussed. Are you? Yeah, it's not on the agenda though. Do we want to discuss that, or I don't know if we can discuss that since it's not on the agenda.
I believe under other business, if this is administration for the commission, it wouldn't be an issue. It's true that we should not discuss things that are not on the agenda, and that falls on me for not adding the ordinance update. At the same time, this is not a public hearing nor anything that requires notice of any kind to receive information.
So we can discuss it then.
I believe so.
Do you want to know the substance of the discussion to make a decision? What I think is going to be the substance?
Well, this is the same thing we discussed at the other hearing, at the other meeting.
Yeah.
It wasn't a hearing.
Yep.
I mean, I guess the question is, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah, I was asked to prepare for this meeting.
Oh, all right. Do we, I mean, I mean, we're here, let's. Yeah, so, the floor is yours. If you could identify yourself for the record.
Yes, my name is John Hamblet. It's Hamblet. I'm co-chair of the Pawtuckaville Citizens Council. I live at 495 Varnum, Varnum Avenue.
Yeah, yeah, somewhere here, gotcha.
This is really just a discussion document to review. We would like the commission to consider 2 ordinance changes. One is a butter notification, and that's not going to be included in tonight's discussion. Mr. Chairman, the abutter notification is currently 100 feet, and we're requesting a change to 300 feet. And the only part of that discussion is that you were asking about a possible variable distance notification process, and I'm going to encourage this board to stick with 300 feet under the abutter notification. As far as adapting a current wetland ordinance to include isolated wetlands, I've had a chance to talk with Craig Thomas about it, and there are 2 things that we need to do. The first is we need to change the jurisdiction clause of the wetlands bylaw. And I have given an example. It's underlined in italics of one change, and then there are 3 other options below that. I'm sure there are 55 other options available. These are taken from existing ordinance wordings in the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Our ordinance, or our wetlands ordinances or bylaws, are in general taken directly from the Massachusetts bylaws. And so the challenge is, if you use a new term in your jurisdiction, such as isolated vegetated wetland, you do need then to define what an isolated vegetated wetland, how am I doing? Is that making sense so far? Everybody's reading. Okay. So what I've done is I've gone through, believe it or not, the 216 cities and towns that do have wetlands ordinances, and I tried to pick out a variety of definitions so that the commission could look at them and open up a discussion about what they think would be appropriate in Lowell. So let me just briefly outline how this works. Under Section B, wetlands, definition of wetlands, I've named the town first: Groton, Billerica, Blackstone, Harvard. These were chosen for the variety of wording rather than their location or anything they might have similar to Lowell. It continues on the back of that page, trying to be environmentally sound. We print on the back, and frankly, the method that I used was I started with the shorter and continued with the longer, rather than the initial ones are not as good as the later ones or anything like that. I will say that wetlands can be defined in a number of ways, and the other thing that seems to vary is the area. Groton has 10 contiguous square feet shall be protected of an isolated wetland, and it goes up from there. Some there is no minimum, and we do have research on the value of very small isolated vegetated wetlands, and I'd be happy to share that with you. The very last heading is other wording, and I put that in there just because it was a little different from all the others. It actually explains why they have an isolated vegetated wetlands clause in their local ordinances or their local bylaws.
Are there any questions from Mr. Hamlet from the commission? I think you've identified, and there's still some more too, you've identified some areas, and you've given us, from Groton, some examples, Billerica, I'm assuming the Blackstone Valley area, Harvard, North Andover, and then Hanson, which also has a buffer zone around there. I think there's some deliberation that that we need to do, and
I think so. Yeah.
And perhaps send this to a subcommittee to see about the viability of getting some of these moving forward as part of the City of Lowell bylaw. Now, this wouldn't be a rule and regulation. This is something that would have to be adopted or approved by the City Council, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And there's another issue that we've seen and that has come up with respect to our newly minted ability to request peer review, and that's the financial limits on the peer review process of $2,500 per peer review with only, and correct me if I'm wrong, we can only request one peer review per project?
I don't have the language in front of me. I believe it says, and this falls in line with a lot of what brought about this discussion of updating the ordinance, being that it's very out of date. It says something along the lines of $2,500 may be requested for peer review for each application. I suppose, and my memory is that could be through several peer reviews. There are very few types of review that could be done. There are very few types of review that would cost, where the cost would allow multiple reviews for one application.
Right. And the peer review process is going to be utilized more readily by the commission where an expert opinion is basically needed and required by law now to either temper, to confirm, or to correspond, or just to be present with or against the information supplied, usually through the applicant. And some of the engineering fees and environmental fees that applicants use can be in the tens of thousands of dollars of range. And I'm not suggesting that be the case in every case, but the more likely scenario for the commission to be utilizing the peer review process is in the more complex projects, and our hands are kind of tied with a $2,500 limit. Now, that's sort of an archaic cap set by the bylaw. There's no cap set by state law, for instance.
I've looked into this because I'm also concerned about this cap for certain types of reviews. My research has indicated that that is not set in any particular way. The ability to use peer review services the authority comes from two places for a conservation commission. One is in the State Wetlands Protection Act, for which there's no maximum dollar amount stated. The second, and this came up when we were talking about the rules and regulations, the ability to actually accept the money in a structure that meets public financing laws is established by the 53G, MGL Chapter 44, Section 53G, which was adopted by the city and extended to conservation commissions. Outside of that, I really believe it's a part of the original ordinance as enacted, and my review indicates that this was adopted more or less as a stock ordinance that was provided by a support organization such as the Mass Association of Conservation Commissions at the time that this was adopted. My guess is at that time that seemed to be an appropriate number.
All right, and I guess the suggestion is that we either remove in its entirety the cap or seek to significantly increase it. Because, you know, the comment is dead on. If we just, for instance, have a project where we want to review the topography and the wetland flagging, I mean, we're not likely to get an engineering crew out there to take shots and elevations and a wetland scientist out there under the cap that we're so constrained with. So it's somewhat it's square in the face of our ability to really rely on the appropriate experts when we need them, especially with, you know, a really complex project, you know, that has impacts that sometimes go outside the scope even of the site itself. So it's, you know, I suppose at this point in time we should perhaps move forward and making recommendations. Can we, Craig, and I'm not even sure we need to send this to a subcommittee. I'll invite the commission members here to comment, but I for one, would like to see our notification process or the notification of abutters to be expanded, and the 300-foot is more in line with what planning and zoning already require for their own notification. So it would bring us within the same sphere of or same radius of notification as is utilized by other city boards. So that one makes sense, and it's perhaps not perfect, but it's perhaps a little bit more commonsensical than what we're utilizing now. As for the protection of an isolated wetland, I think it's a good idea. I don't want to be protecting every little wet spot, though. I think we should perhaps take a look at some of the surrounding communities who are or who have a provision as Mr. Hamlet has supplied us with, and maybe invite you to call local administrators and see how they've been dealing with it, and see how it's been working out for them. You know, have they found them overly restrictive, and perhaps draft some language, you know, either if there's any model language from the MACC or you know, language that's been utilized in other communities that's withstood challenges, because you don't want to draft a provision only to find out that the DEP, you know, routinely issues superseding orders on it, or it hasn't survived a judicial challenge. I'd
be happy to help Craig with that. acronym you just used, MA, is that the Massachusetts Commission of Conservation Commissioners or something? I did look at their wording, and they didn't seem to have a lot directly related to isolated wetlands. I don't know why, and I can spend more time looking at that, but we can certainly get more information. And this information is a little dated. I believe it's from 2004, and so I don't know if there have been any updates.
And if I'm not missing anything else, lastly, you know, again, let's discuss this, but I for one would just rather remove the ceiling, and the peer review process, you know, could be anything. I don't know. Would we need an opinion from the legal department as to how high we can go? I mean, I mean, there's got to be some limit to it. We can't say, you know, I mean, there's got to be some limit to it.
The standard that's used when it comes to planning and zoning is a rational nexus and within the scope of the project. So throwing out these terms with no context, what it means is if you're proposing a single-family home, it's within the size and scope of the development to do a review of the topography or the drainage on site. It's not within the scope of the project to do an engineering analysis of all the roadways in the immediate vicinity to see if they have the structural capacity to hold a few additional single-family vehicles. In line with some developments that have gone through the city recently, it's reasonable when you have a large commercial structure to review and require upgrades to intersections to a significant extent where they're impacted by that development. It's not reasonable to try and build a new bridge based on a new development. I don't know if that same standard applies to the Conservation Commission, honestly. I would think it can only be of a help to this commission to refer that to the law department.
I would suppose that in some instances, the independent review could be review of materials supplied by the applicant, or it could also be a review of the site itself. But I suppose that could be done on a project-by-project basis. But in that regard, having some sort of direction from the law department as to what works and what is allowable would be prudent. And I'll open it up to comments. I mean, those are I agree with you, Mr. Hamlet, that those need to be addressed in the bylaw with the addition of the removal of the limitation on the peer review funds.
Can I add comments in while you're asking comments, or
Well,
am I
why don't we
done?
let the commission finish and
Okay.
and then we can go back.
I'll just say that I concur. I know in my line of work, $2,500 maybe gets you, at best, 20 hours of a professional consultant's time to look at a document, or maybe, 2 site visits. So completely support removing the ceiling and giving us a little bit more flexibility so we can do a thorough and independent review.
Yeah, especially given the nature of some of these projects. Some of these projects are multi-million-dollar projects, and $2,500 is a coffee break. So.
I'd like to see all 3 of those changes made. I don't know if it's necessary to do them all at once, but seeing as they have several levels of review to go through, perhaps it would be a good idea to get them in the form that we'd like to see them and then submit them all at once.
Yeah, my comment would be, I mean, the 300-foot notification radius is fairly easy. I mean, we can model the language. We can ask Craig to draw up some language for us to look at and hammer out. The peer review funds, the limitation that would just be well, I don't know. Let's get some language back from the law department on that one as to how that should be handled. And what I would suggest with the freshwater or I mean, the isolated wetland, would be to have Craig draw up some model language, perhaps maybe a couple of alternates. I for one am not a big fan of putting a buffer zone around something like that. It would be treating it more like a vernal pool as opposed to something with a buffer zone. But that's just my own thoughts. Some buffer zone may be warranted. I don't know. It perhaps could be in line with the 25-foot riverfront type zone or something like that. I don't know. I just, if it's not bordering, then I think we could treat this more in line with like a vernal pool type situation or an isolated land subject to flooding where there is no buffer zone. It is what it is, and it exists there.
And I think your point or suggestion you made earlier is a good one, to maybe have Craig check to see if going at that route has run into certain legal challenges. How effective has it been to include that provision to include isolated vegetated wetlands? See how, in practice, how effective has it been having that provision in the bylaw?
I think all three of those sound good, and the one thing that we mentioned, I think was the last meeting, was looking at whether or not we could extend that 25-foot riverfront boundary in places, and I don't know if that could all be pulled in with this, or if that would be a separate
that one
topic.
Yeah, that one involves more than just us. That's a huge undertaking.
Oh, right, because that was at the state level.
Yeah, that's at the state level and perhaps even at the federal level in some instances. So that one's perhaps a stone left unturned at this point in time. Yeah.
May I ask two quick questions?
Certainly.
Does the third-party rule that you have for Conservation Commission, is that, Craig, the same as one for zoning board and planning? So if we're making a change, it's also going to have to be approved by other boards, or is this specific to Conservation Commission? The peer review.
Through the chair, the answer to that is there are a few levels to this, but the enabling law that allows us to do these things is the same across the board in at least one regard. The reason we're having this discussion as it relates to the ordinance is the local wetlands ordinance has a specific clause that limits the total amount that may be spent on peer review services per application. I have not found similar language in planning and zoning restrictions. And indeed, even though it hasn't been tested, again, the standard that exists for planning and zoning as we've interpreted it to this point is, as I described, that where it relates to the size and the nature of what's being proposed. There's no specific limit. I'm not certain as to the exact reason for that, but as I stated, I think it has to do with whatever model language was used at the time that this ordinance was adopted.
Yeah, I think what Craig is trying to say is that there's a balancing act going on. We have the same enabling statute that allows us to peer review a project as does planning and zoning. It's the same.
Right.
It's the same state statute.
Right.
But we're by the City of Lowell bylaw and the wetlands ordinance are limited in the amount that we can expend for the peer review process.
But zoning and planning aren't?
Under the Wetlands Protection Act itself, our constraints for requesting or ordering a peer review process are very different than the constraints that the planning board and zoning have. But, and this is the but, and this is where we need the advice and counsel of the law department, if we remove the ceiling and make it open-ended, does that then invite that balance? Does that then indicate now that we have to provide more justification, whereas before we didn't, towards the reason for the peer review process. By removing the ceiling, you could say it invites abuse. Okay, not that we're doing that, but you could effectively kill a project by peer reviewing it to death. So there has to be, and as it stands now, we can request a peer review process, and the only appealable reason is that the applicant or that the peer review wasn't qualified to do the work, from what I understand. Other than that, they can't say anything about it, or an applicant can't say anything about it. It's a non-appealable issue. Whereas for planning and zoning, it is, because the scope of the request for the peer review was improper or was beyond the scope of what they're allowed to ask for. Right now, we don't have that constraint, but by making it open-ended, do we have that constraint? And that's something I'd like an answer from the law department.
Interesting.
Okay.
My second comment is the buffer zone and the isolated wetlands. All of this research is taken from this 43-page paper. I gave you a link to it in the document 2 weeks ago when we talked about this. And the question they ask that's being answered over these 43 pages is, does the municipality regulate buffer zones around isolated vegetated wetlands? So when we talk about 216 towns, those are the 216 towns that do regulate buffer zones around isolated wetlands. And then we can get more information based on that.
Yeah, again, in my view on buffer zones I guarantee you those 9 turkeys I saw the other day on Saturday have absolutely no idea whether they were 100 feet from the bordering vegetated wetland or the time it takes for them to gobble a couple of times, okay? I mean, and what their comfort level was. I mean, it's an arbitrary number. It just happens to be a convenient number. Why isn't it 100 meters? I mean, because we're on the imperial system, not on the metric system. I mean, is there some science behind it? Yeah, but like I like to say, why isn't it 47.5 feet? Why isn't it 362 feet? It's 100 feet because it's a convenient number. So if there's some science behind the reason or for a buffer zone on an isolated vegetated wetland, then let's hear it. Let's hear the science, and let's make a determination and base it on that. Okay.
Great. Oh, what's the next step?
It seems like the next step is for me to refer at least one of these pieces to the law department and then to draft up some additional language to use the language you provide, in particular the isolated vegetated wetlands, and try and find model language for which judicial review has been utilized, so we know that it can stand. Not that any of this language is particularly better than others. We want to be confident if we're moving in one direction that the effort will pay off, or there's precedent for what we're trying to do.
Great.
All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. We have some minutes. And we have some minutes. Do I have a motion on the December 14th, 2011 and the January 11th, 2012? We're getting caught up, huh?
I'd move to accept them with maybe 1 or 2 corrections. Small corrections.
I'll second that.
All right, do we know what the corrections are?
I believe the first one, one of the speakers at the hearing was named Banacos, and it's Banacos.
Can you provide that feedback via email, and I'll make that change?
Sure.
Okay.
And the other one was, I think I may have made the motion to give the certificate of compliance to Mr. Dowling.
That's my memory.
And you had Mr. Lovely as the...
I can make that change.
Right, okay, any further discussion? So the approval as modified, correct? Okay, all in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed? The ayes have it. And you're all set on the reissuance of the COC, okay. And do I have a motion to adjourn? I don't think we have
Motion to
anything to
adjourn.
assign. Seconded by,
Second.
by Commissioner Varnum. All in favor? Opposed? The ayes have it. Good night.